Today I'm going to discuss something that's very close to my heart. How to deal with probabilistic AI and still keep the deterministic data as a foundation. Today I have Christian Monberg with me. He is the CTO and product leader at Zeta Global. I'm Suresh Mathew, and this is One Idea. Thanks, Christian, for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Suresh. It's a pleasure.
Okay, first question first. 2019. And that happened. That is unbelievable. How did you even think about doing what you did in 2019?
2019, you're talking about when we unveiled our first 5-year vision for where agentic technology was going to be. Back then, we didn't call it agentic technology. We were reading the tea leaves. And you probably read the same papers your team did. It was the GAN, the General Adversarial Networks, and starting to understand that computers could create. Like, wow, I've seen this. I've read about it. Computers are going to create a little bit. And then we read about transformers. And that was a really big point in all of our lives. The paper was All You Need Is Attention, came out of Google. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm starting to understand how learning and machine learning is going to change. I'm going to bring these things together. And so in 2019, we had been very, very articulate about our vision and needing a system, strong system of record, clear abstraction between services. Data needs to be available for machine learning back then. And we also knew that when I joined another company, we had great data assets and we wanted answers out of it. And you couldn't code all of those answers. The data was too, it was magnificent. It was huge. So we decided we had a good idea of where technology was going to go. We planted our flag. We've been marching towards it ever since.
My question was supposed to start with 2013. The reason I stuck to the 2019 is that's when probably I did not even see that coming. Let's put it that way, right? So at that point, we were thinking about a different problem statement altogether. Now, let's take a look at the probabilistic modeling, right? Now, you have an AI that is clearly out and out probabilistic, and you are trying to deal with it while you have a deterministic data model under it. And this model is probably your ticket to success, right? So how do you marry these two?
I might start with a punchy line, which is the model was never the product. The second thing I'd say is system of record data. I think it's really lost on most people what that requires. I've spent well over a decade working on this. We've bought companies. I've worked with companies that have been working on this for 20 years. When I go to talks at some of the big foundation model companies and they talk about taking over the world with software on demand and being able to build any new SaaS software tomorrow, if you look at them, and you might have to timestamp this, but they normally have like a little dotted box at the bottom that says system of record or data or something. They're not sure how it's going to be there. And, it's compounded by a lot of these data warehouse companies that are all transforming right now, but not all of them really have a strong understanding what it takes to build a system of record, the pipelines, the knowledge, and that knowledge needs to be encoded. And there's something special there. When we can encode that knowledge into skills and combine it with agents, you start to get something that really does have IP and a moat and defensible. And I'm sure you see it in your business as well.
Now, for you, when you got acquired, right? So you have two data sets to work with. What were the challenges there?
We had developed a solution with conviction and machine learning. So all the data access patterns were about getting access to a lot of data very quickly. So we were trying to figure out the equivalent of vector databases back in 2013, 2014. I remember calling my mom, and she was a mathematician. I was like, Mom, I need to do this Jacquard similarity on this matrix that we built, and it's just too big for the hardware I have with my AWS credits. Can you help? And she couldn't, which would have been great if she could have. But the challenges were just very, very different back then. So you had to hedge towards good system designs. When we were acquired by Zeta, they had less of a services-based data model and more of like a database approach where they had DBAs.
So these data sets were different in nature.
Very different, and the approach to how the data is stored and accessed was very different, like stored procedures as an example.
What was the main difference between these two data sets?
That's a long list. I think it could be summarized by the data we were working with tended to be first-party data. That's the first step. So it was well controlled. It was all abstracted behind data services. We had 3 canonical types of data, which have stood the test of time. In fact, I was sitting through Palantir, which is an incredible company. I was sitting through their kind of architecture review, and they use the same 3 data primitives. They have different names for them, but same exact 3 data primitives as we did back then. So I think we got maybe a little bit lucky with choosing the right ones. So those data primitives are available via services. They're related to each other, and it gives you a very flexible way of encountering different challenges for different businesses. That's one way to do it. Your ontological layer is owned by you and adaptable. What we walked into was no real intelligence about the data. It was just stored in really big tables. If you wanted to get something out of it, you wrote SQL queries, and you continue to morph those queries until you got what you needed out of it. Those structures had to come together. The pipelines that create the data, they had to come together. Measuring everything into what I would call a system of record needed to evolve. And, after that, we got into the medallion architecture, bronze, silver, gold, the way that you mint it in different ways. And that's been a journey that we've had along the way. But yeah, very different data. And, it's probably passe now, but if you don't get the data right, the AI is never going to be right.
Back to my 2019 question. This is again still the part where, as an engineer, I believe that I did not even think about that, right? So GPT-3, and you did this Athena.
We called it Zoe back then.
Zoe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you did. I mean, I think GPT, I can be fact-checked on this, but I think it was a 2020 thing. We didn't see ChatGPT until 2022. But I think there was a pretty straight line. Like if you were sitting around in 2019 thinking about having a lot of data, like I remember being like, man, I bet I could ingest all of Wikipedia. And, these things are already really good at understanding not just the n-grams and the words and how they predict the next word, but whole sentences and meaning. And then it can generate new sentence. Like you could put those pieces together. You knew that it was going to come together. Generative AI was going to become a thing. Again, we didn't get it all right. We had our primitives as we built and built and built, and we've rehashed and gone 2 steps backwards at times to get this right.
The three pillars that you always talk about, right? The system of record, MCP, and finally your RAG, right? And industry also converged. At the end of the day, you saw that coming together from that side too.
Oh, we got smacked around a bit along the way.
How was the adoption and realization? Was it a huge surprise to you guys, or was it, okay, yeah, this is what we expect?
No, because this good system design is still paramount. It's the most important part of these agentic businesses we're building. And it's something people are getting wrong more often than not. And I talk to brands all around the world that are trying to get this right. We looked at the way these systems come together. We're like, oh, we need something that looks like MCP. I don't remember what we called it right now. And a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, I wrote a paper about protocol agnostic, like data transport for agents. And it was A to A was a big thing, the agent thing. MCP hadn't quite come out, or maybe it just come out. And so everybody's running around. People who hadn't started yet were like, oh, MCP, this is great. I'll just use MCP. For us, we had to, again, go back to basic principles and have clear abstractions between our services, because MCP is great today, but new models are coming and new agentic AI is coming. Might not even be called Gen AI in the future. I expect all of these things to continue to change, and I don't think we have the right kernel for it right now. Like the base understanding was linear and predictable, but something new will come in the next 5 years.
Now, the steak and the sizzle framing that you have, right? So I'm a big fan of that. Data as a steak and AI as a sizzle. People generally see exactly the other way around. How do you convince your teams that this is how it should be seen?
So I'm really blessed that the teams I work on don't suffer a fool. They take their wisdom from a long horizon. They've been thinking about this deeply for a while. Also, as a company, we IPO'd 5 years ago, and our banner said data and AI. That was what we were literally hanging our banner on. So getting the data part was really important. The organizations we work with, they're getting very patient, is the word I'll use. And I was surprised by this. But as I go talk with brands, they're looking around and seeing a lot of progress, but you hear a lot of this. I built an agent. You very rarely hear, I deployed an agent. I made the agent available to everybody in the organization so they could use it outside of ecosystems like maybe Copilot if you have Office 365. And so I see business leaders, CTOs, CEOs, even board members say, oh, there's a lot of noise happening right now. I want to be patient, make sure we have the right strategy. For us to do that, We need to make very calculated, measured bets. Those are the companies that are very successful right now. The ones that are trying to go all in on everybody, they're asking their CIO to have one strategy, their CMO, their CRO, their CTO, everybody's competing to go be as smart as they can be. That's creating some chaos. And I'm not sure they're getting the signal they need amidst the noise. And so as far as it goes for our business, when we walk in, we start with core truths. How's your data working? The answer for that is 99 times out of 100, it's not working. And that's really the problem they have, is they need a
The
data
problem is the
fabric.
only problem they have.
And so they know it's no longer about the sizzle. We can show the sizzle. Oh, you guys will take us to sizzle. But the biggest problems they have and what they want our help solving is transformation. And it starts with data transformation, getting a bedrock in place that looks more like a data lakehouse than it does a bunch of disparate databases that don't talk to each other. It looks like making sure that data is compliant and secure and available to agents in the right way. And they've got people that can work on it. They don't always have the alignment they need. And there's politics that goes into it as well. That's part of doing business anywhere.
Especially with the attention to AI, everybody gets that focus and people want to be the champion.
They do. A lot of the champions that I see hired are still quiet in the back of the room. They're anointed as the head of AI transformation, and they're drinking out of the water hose. And with all the sizzle happening, they're kind of they're starstruck. They're looking around everywhere, like the flashes are going off in their eyes. And I think the calm, cool approach of how's your data? How is that system supporting your AI transformation? That gives them a secure place to start, something they can audit easily. And they understand the building blocks on top of it. And don't get me wrong, you can fix your data and still not transform your company. It would be a great start, be better than where these organizations are today. But this is about transforming an organization, how they work, how individuals collaborate with each other, their speed to outcomes, their efficiency, their performance, hitting bigger numbers, creating better products, having more meaningful interactions with their consumers, depending on what kind of industry they're in.
At least if you fix your data, you have something that's reusable for the next strategy at the very least.
Bingo. Yeah.
Now let's go back to hallucination again. Why do you think it's an unsolved problem? Why do you think it cannot be solved?
A lot of ways to answer this. Hallucinations happen in all aspects of our life. In Google today, if you go to write a query and you use a 3-letter acronym, it might get the right one, it might get the wrong one. And even worse, it might go into AI mode and start giving you very established answers, right? And so what's missing there is context. What's missing there is grounding,
Got it.
which is getting attached to a core source of truth, like real world truth. What may or may not be missing there, probably not with Google, is a good eval framework that finds consistency in patterns. I was with a company just last week, and they were touting how they wanted to use agents to do all of this cool stuff, and it was about performance optimization. I found out through the conversation they were using agents to find those optimization techniques. That probably will evolve, but right now, big data optimization needs some more traditional machine learning attached to it. Agents aren't great at churning through petabytes of data, building a model, and finding the right optimization point in it. They might be able to find the right objective function along the way, but actually churning through the data quickly is hard. That doesn't mean that long horizon tasks aren't good what they do, but pure optimization is, in my opinion, still a predictive machine learning challenge. They didn't have that. So that means that they entrusted too much autonomy to an agent. And autonomy needs to be earned through evidence. They don't have the feedback loop to progressively start building better and better models. We know how to train traditional models. I mean, that's how the agents are built themselves. So in order to get away from hallucinations, you need grounding, obviously. You need very strong eval frameworks that's representative not just of what the agent responded with, but what the consumer actually went through. You need incredible context. I can't say enough about that in source truth. You need a system of record because that's what it's going to grow off. And even with all of those in place, I still think you're going to see hallucinations in play. And there's less than there was a year ago. There's less than there was 6 months ago. But this is optimization, or machine learning is traditionally or inherently probabilistic. Yeah. So there's no real way to get every single thing out of it, and nor would you want it to.
Exactly. It is by design in my mind. Right? That's exactly how it's supposed to work, and it's working the way it's supposed to work.
Yep. And when computing, like when we get to quantum and the way quantum computing works and probabilistic nature of quantum computing, we may come up with new approaches to AI that changes this, but right now it's by design and it's allowing us to find great outcomes that we might not have expected otherwise. So we need safeguards in place.
Basically, let it hallucinate. You just have to know when it does that, at least to some extent. The other way around, when it doesn't, you should be able to at least say that, you know what, this is right.
And zero shot works for some things, zero shot doesn't work for other things. I'm really interested in the modalities that are coming out of AI. Like how are you interacting with the content? So we'll use creative because it's a simple example. Make a funny picture of me and my family. And we've all done it. And it comes back, you're like, oh, that's actually pretty funny, except I want to change this one thing. And you can't, right? Or you couldn't. Tools are getting better. Imagine if you had your traditional tools, your, depending on your vintage, MS Paint or Adobe or Figma, and you could make those changes a little more specifically or by hand. I think that's a modality where there's an interchange between agents and our traditional tools that's still being figured out, no matter what industry you're in. So the interplay between agentic and even conversational interfaces and what I would almost call system of record software apps that tell you exactly what's happening, those need to be able to dance and create an operating system. And we're going to figure it out as an industry, but those affordances haven't been designed. The affordance of a doorknob is there. If I turn a doorknob, door's going to open. It's not going to like open a trap door underneath me. When I talk to my software, I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen. Now, it's up to us to make people delightfully surprised, but they don't have real expectations of how things are going to work in an agentic software world.
You decided to drop your conventions when MCP got dropped, right? For the right reason. I'm a developer who would be obsessed about what my pet projects are, and I would probably not let go of things that easily. How did you manage to do that?
We're very stubborn on standards, and we believe this era requires new standards. In many ways, we want to set the standards where they don't exist or adopt ecosystem standards, stand on the shoulders of giants. When Anthropic said, no, we're going with MCP, it was a pretty good signal to us that that was probably one we wanted to use. And we left our back door open. We left options with agnostic protocols, interfaces, and we were sorting it out. Maybe we got lucky on that one, and I'm not sure the race is over. There might be better standards that come out soon. I'm going to come back to something I said earlier, which is it's all about building good systems here, and good standards are part of good systems. When you have that as the input to your initiative, instead of the sizzle, like great agents that do cool things in a vacuum, you build a pyramid up that has a really solid foundation, and everybody that's contributing to that foundation doesn't want to introduce a crack. So you're right. We've got a lot of engineers that build amazing projects. Some of them become part of that foundation, and the ones that don't, they're happy to let them leave because we're all learning. So the time we spent building our own version of Model Context Protocol, that's not wasted time. That goes in all of our bank accounts so we can spend it later. I think that is money saved for another day, knowledge of how to make these systems work better. And I've said it before, but we're all inventing this industry simultaneously. It's not like OpenAI is inventing this industry for us. The model is not the product. It never was going to be. We've got to learn how to use these models to make better products together. And if you go listen to 100 podcasts or read 100 books tomorrow, you will hear a lot of the same themes coming up over and over, which is why you're having this podcast. So people can learn and start to do pattern matching.
Now, spec-driven development. So this is something that I'm sure all of us are super interested in. Everybody is moving towards that, right? It's not spec-driven software development. It's not even spec-driven test development. It's spec-driven, probably the product development or the company development. Everything is spec. How do you advise the audience to transition from the traditional development to spec-driven development?
I'm sure you've been on your path on this, and I'm sure your audience is on this path as well. I'll share some of the things that have worked for us. So a year and a half ago, we got very serious about AI-assisted development. We knew that the models weren't where they needed to be, and so we worked on what we could. Maybe that was like writing RCAs faster. Maybe it was some automated like testing or test definition. Maybe it was understanding that some problems like DevOps needed a lot more attention. It was hard to spin your own. And so we started to really understand the constraints of where AI was. Some people were better at adopting it than others. Fast forward to the end of the year, amazing team I work on, Bharat and Patrick, Manoj and others, and they wrote this manifesto called Crossing the Chasm. And the manifesto was all about going from AI assisted development to AI native development, because me with, the gavel and the big chair, I said, I want everybody to be using, developing AI native code by the end of the year. 100% is what I'd like to get to, close to. And so instead of calling me crazy and calling me a tyrant, they got to work and thinking about what that would take. So some things that have worked really well for us. Spec-driven development is absolutely a model. We have a small team that is responsible for writing those standards. Those standards need to work together in a system. And so they've invented something we call Foundry, and it's our interpretation of how spec-driven development is going to work. And there's a lot of components to it. Again, it's a system. So how does security work into it? How does QA shift all the way left? Like what does that look like anymore? How are eval frameworks consistent? Because you don't want teams building their own. Brown bags, share outs. And still, it doesn't always stick. Seeing is believing in this world. So maybe standards, number one. Number two, make sure that you have people sitting down next to each other. Because I have storied engineers with 30 years of experience. They could write for any company in this world, who were skeptical, and 2 hours after sitting down and watching somebody go through the standards in a system that they could adopt easily, then very next day, all of the work they did, the pods they oversaw, had all adopted it in one day. Number 3 is, with spec-driven development, we need to take time to think about organizational change, and change management is very hard. The environment I just shared with you, where you have seeing is believing, you're sharing things out, and you've got standards, those need to get better over time. And people need to see that there's some evidence of recursive learning, right? Go forward, come back, and make it better and better again. And that like genuine engineering of a process really appeals to engineers and product people alike, where they feel like they're not just being mandated to change their process, but they're part of building something that's central to our operating model as an organization. So Tiger teams work really effectively for that. They push the horizon. They can be the bleeding edge of the spear, and they'll learn things, and they'll come back and they'll inform the process and share it out to everybody again. So that's been some of the big parts of our journey. I'm a massive proponent of spec-driven development and everything it means to be AI native, because I'm seeing with my own eyes, and projects that would have taken, like the projects you never want to talk about, the ones that would probably take over a year, they're flying high in weeks and months. It's just a whole new world for us. Now, we got to be careful not to go too crazy. Now, just because you can build it doesn't mean you should necessarily. And you don't want to create more tech debt, and you want your customers to understand what they're getting into. And so you need strategies for all of those. And I'll come back to systems.
Let's double click on the software dev side of it, right? Let's assume I'm writing 10 lines of code. Do you want, let's say I was a developer in your team. Would you want me to read all those 10 lines, or are you okay with me taking those 10 lines from, say, Claude and just pushing it in, because I know that it works and I have some tests validating it too? So do you want me to really understand it, or are you okay with me checking it in?
I want the system to work. I don't want the process to fail. So I'll give you an example. I believe there's a time, for better or worse, but there will be a time when you'll go to a website or to an app, whatever it is, and something won't quite work for you. And you'll interact with that website, maybe have a conversation or chat or do whatever. And in 2 minutes, the feature will work. Now, work backwards from that. Do I want you looking at the code? I mean, if I want the system to work, so I want you to ensure the code works perfectly, and it works perfectly inside the construct of our business. You're not introducing like a whole new framework to,
Of course.
add a toaster notification, right?
Of course.
So I'd probably rather you go look at all the agents that are going to introspect your code and make sure the output is right along the way, or it will catch errors. I probably am looking for engineers to continue to build, but maybe build a factory instead of building a widget.
Now, what else has to change, right? So right now we know that there is spec-driven development for product managers, for engineers, for QA, and for your BD and sales as well, right? So everybody is going to be on the same page. Now, from a handoff standpoint, now that has to change too, right? You cannot expect the same language to be spoken between these two parties anymore, right? So what else has to change for the org to be like fully ready to adopt AI?
First, I'll talk about our experience on our team. 9 months ago, our design team realized they couldn't push pixels anymore. And we sat down and talked about it. I was like, yeah, The future of your team is probably not in Photoshop. And they understood why. And the why isn't because Photoshop isn't great or the craft isn't great. It's because you have engineers and product people and QA people that are not going to sit around for 2 weeks while you do your design process and crit. That whole process needs to change. So that's one example of it. Every company right now is running into the problem of what happens when your PM ships software. And the engineers are like, oh, that's my job.
And that's an MVP at best.
That's what they're saying, right? But if you have the right like spec-driven development, ours is called Spade, like if you have the right process in place, you write a good spec, and the system should kind of take care of the rest and be ready to go. We're bumping up. There's challenges with it. The next piece I'll talk about is co-location, which is going to be contentious. We have offices all around the world, bought companies around the world. I travel around the world, amazing people everywhere. And it's worked pretty well because I follow in the sun. We're actually not just working 12 hours a day, we're working 24 hours a day, right? The pace of this AI-driven development or AI-native development doesn't happen in 24 hours. Happens in 24 minutes often.
Yep.
And so co-location is, the hard way of putting it. Co-availability might be the easier way of putting it. We need teams that are working on the same problem space to be available in the moment with each other. And an hour is too much of a delay. It just breaks you out. For anybody that's worked with agents, can you imagine if you had to wait for the agent to get back to you for an hour with an answer? Be like, I'm going to go find another agent. There's other agents that'll get back to me, at least with some answer or a next step in like 5 seconds. Yeah. Then I want to talk about big enterprises that are more uncertain. We're really steeped in it. We've been an AI company for a long time. The brands that I go work with, they are scared of that organizational shift and that change management. They just don't know what it means.
Why are they scared?
On the surface, it's mandates without really knowing what those mandates mean. They haven't charted it out. On a deeper level, it means they're going to have to move people's jobs around and change jobs, and change is scary to organizations. Yeah. And I'm not talking about the 500-person startup or the 1,000-person tech company. I'm talking about the 40,000-person company that has a lot of people they love, but they're like, I don't know if Judy or John, if they're needed anymore for these tasks. So how do they upskill those individuals? How do they change their jobs so they still have meaning? Because they're bright people that understand the domain. But I think that's challenging. That's going to be a challenging part about this whole transformation. Probably a little bit off subject with that comment, but I think it's important for us to know there is uncertainty. We're going to figure it out together. And we've got to be part of the answer. Each of us has to be part of the answer.
So this is where I felt that I had to take some calls, right? So there were a few options in front of us. I can do the same module with 2 people or 20 people, right? Now, the debate is, if I do with 20 people, the good thing is, if there is a production issue or a problem or something similar at any point, I have the developers who understand the product in and out, and I can fix that quickly, right? The 2 people problem is 2, right? One, they may not be available because it's just 2 people, right? Because the other one is 20.
Yep.
Which means they will be available. One of them will be available. And second, you may have built something that's awesome, that's finer than the 20 people work, but it's not known to that community. That was a debate.
I love the debate. I'm going to, again, work from the end backwards. In the short term, companies like ours and yours either has it or will get there soon. When we have outages, we stick AI on it. And our MTTR has gone way down. And so where we used to take our best engineers, put them in a war room, and within somewhere between 30 minutes and 3 hours, I'm just making up the numbers, we'd hopefully have a good answer and have something ready to be reviewed and go back in to code. Now with the right tooling, that's happening in a few minutes by one engineer. If you go forward in time, there's a big debate about, well, what if we're a Rust shop and AI writes Go code? Right now, that's problematic because you only have Rust developers. You don't have Go developers that can work on this stuff. I think in the future, not long from now, it's not going to matter, because as long as the AI can understand the language and has access, not to a super obscure language, one that's well documented like Go, then it's going to figure out the root cause issue and be able to fix it. That assumes a world in the future where all of the code is well understood by the AI systems.
Exactly.
And for businesses that are thinking about getting there, I recommend to all the teams, they start thinking about transforming even their legacy repositories into repositories that can be easily interpreted by code and updated by that AI as well. Maybe not updating the code today, but all the metadata around it, documentation, any other markdown files you may be using to reshape that code, its interpretation, understanding, the way it's deployed, the way QA is validated and your coverage on QA. Security. I mean, we're up for a big mess with Mythos and Glasswing and Anthropic. We should be thinking about our legacy code, not just the new code we're writing. All of it will need to be interpreted by your broader system in an AI native world for you to pull away in the coming years. This is a 2027 thing, not a 2030 thing, in my impression.
I think precisely what most companies did and what we did too, right? So for us, the product itself is AI. So it is a lot easier for us to get an AI adoption because that's what we are preaching at.
Yeah.
So for us, that was in our DNA. So that everybody just adopted it quickly. And one thing I realized is without even thinking about the production problems, that's exactly what the teams did the next thing. There was no formal project to do this. So there was a project created and it was done out of sheer need, right? There was an RCA agent. There was an agent to ask questions to.
Yep.
And this agent gave beautiful answers.
Yep.
And that's what everybody's using. So it's an easier, happier world. The only thing that we did not do is decisioning with AI. I think that is where, in my mind, Gen AI will never get on the decisioning side.
Which part of decisioning?
Let's say you want to take a left or a right, and both are options. You need to take either left or right, and you need to take both are options. You need to take the direction that's better for you.
With a prior, right? Like we'll use the Bayesian approach or something.
Yeah. So if you have prior knowledge and that can substantiate your thinking, then you have a choice.
So yeah, I totally agree with you. And this is something I'm passionate about as well. Generative UI, or they're different than agentic systems, but they get grouped together, should be creating or reading from systems that can actually make that decision for you.
Absolutely.
So in our world, we have something called simulator and another thing called advisor. They work together and agents can go say, basically,
Yes.
is this a good idea?
Show me.
And then when it's running, it can go to advisor and be like, is this running well? But it can't decide that without input from simulator advisor.
Exactly.
Those look more like traditional machine learning systems.
Classical model is that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we have something else called model workbench where you can go into agent and say, please build me other machine learning models and do backtesting on it. Show me it's right, but it's using traditional methods, and then it deploys to those parts of the systems.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you that agents, and this gets back to the hallucination thing. You can hallucinate so easily when you don't have real data providing answers to you.
Yeah, hallucinations should not be fixed. It should be handled right. So awesome. So in fact, we are exactly on the same page there. Awesome. So first up, thank you so very much for coming. I think this was a discussion at the right time, especially when leaders are trying to really adopt AI. They always look at the pace. They look at the outcome. They look for what is the right leading indicator that tells them that, you know what, you are on the right track. What is the indicator that tells you that you're there? Right? So people are really confused, and your story really helps them figure out, you know what, are we there and what are the right things that we're doing? System of record is probably the heart or the key to everything. The phrase I love is really steak and sizzle, right? So that is the right way to look at AI and data. AI is just a sizzle. Focus on the steak really, really, really well. Thank you so much.
Suresh, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for doing this for the community of curious people out there. I think that we're going to figure this out together much faster than any of us anticipated.
Absolutely. Thank you.